This week on The Record, the trial of Kim Gardner. The court hears arguments in the push to expel the circuit attorney. Our panel of expert lawyers react to the first hearing and what it could mean for justice in St. Louis. Plus, abortion politics returns to the U.S. Supreme Court. What's at stake after a Texas judge blocked access to the most commonly used abortion pill in the country? Missouri Senator Josh Hawley and Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth are on the record. And transition time at City Hall. Board of Aldermen President Megan Green comes on the record after swearing the oath of office for her first full term. It's all coming up right now. St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner appeared in court Tuesday as her lawyers asked the judge to throw out the case against her. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey's office said a repeated pattern of willful neglect will eventually show that she has forfeited her job. Welcome to the record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Those Kim Gardner hearings streamed right here on 5+. We turn now to Anders Walker, an expert who teaches criminal and constitutional law at St. Louis University, also an author, and now you can add to your resume a trial analyst for us here at 5+. Thank you very much for joining us. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Judge John Turbitsky, an appellate court judge who's sort of filling in for all of the lower court judges here, he gave the circuit attorney and the Attorney General 1 week to file briefs, to make their arguments in writing, make their case that this case should or should not go toward trial. From what you heard, what are the chances that this judge throws this case out?
Well, it's a good question. I think Judge Turbitsky wants to know, is there a dispute of fact here? And if so, can we narrow down what exactly the claims are? The Attorney General is alleging a pattern and practice of neglect, but the judge seemed a little reluctant to go straight to trial because there were a few cases, and what exactly was the motivation for this pattern and practice?
Yeah, it's hard to drill into that. It seems you can make a case there was neglect, like the failure to do something, and not make that higher standard that it was on purpose.
Exactly. There's a lot of debate over willful, as in this must be intentional neglect. And then the question is, what reason would the circuit attorney's office have for willfully not performing a duty?
As I listened to the judge, I heard him seem to suggest that, well, to know what a person's thinking, to know their intent, you almost have to get in their head, or you have to get into the inner workings of their office. At one point he made this quip, it seems to me the whole case here is about the inner workings of the office when they were discussing disclosure. So it seems like that should almost have to be determined in a trial process or in the push toward trial, not in this first hearing. Is that a proper reading?
I think that's right. I think that's what the judge was pointing to. And so, for example, one assistant circuit attorney resigned last week, Natalia Gerkowitz. She revealed a few things about the inner workings of the office that could be very relevant.
Yeah, walk us through the strategy that we saw there, because there's another high-ranking, I think the first circuit attorney, an aide to Kim Gardner, if you will, who had separate counsel, a lawyer there. And that lawyer was advocating all the disclosure of all these documents should go through the proper channel of the office, then to the Attorney General. There should be a check point at the circuit attorney's office before we hand this over. And she was almost making the claim that the now scorned, exiled Natalia Gerkowitz should also have to submit her documents through that checkpoint at the circuit attorney's office and not independently. It looks like they want control. What did you see there?
I think that's right. I think they want to control the evidence that gets into the record. They want to prevent this from being a fishing expedition where the Attorney General is just looking for anything and without any predetermined or preset ideas. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they'll be able to control that information, though. I think the Attorney General can call former employees as witnesses independent of the circuit attorney.
Whether they are current employees, past employees, or if they just have knowledge about that period of time or those workings. I don't know if this next question is rooted in law or just in sort of public conscience, but Kim Gardner's attorneys told the judge, our office is slammed. We heard one of the lawyers for the judges say that this whole system is near or on the verge of near total collapse, meaning they're not making their hearings. There are serious criminal cases right now where there is no prosecutor in court. To what extent can a judge take that outside or ongoing issue into his thinking as he evaluates how quickly or whether this case should go to trial at all?
Well, that can be relevant. Is it the case that the circuit attorney is not hiring, not interested in hiring? Or is it the case that with the backlog from COVID, this has hit prosecutors across the country? There is an overwhelming number of cases that have to be cleared, and maybe the circuit attorney is taking positive steps to address the matter. If so, it would be in her interest to say so. Here's what I'm going to do, here's how I'm going to fix it, and by September it'll all be handled.
How closely is the legal community in St. Louis and perhaps beyond watching this case?
I think closely. This is a big case. This is a very rare kind of thing to remove a sitting prosecutor who's been elected twice by the people. It's going to be very surprising if the Supreme Court of Missouri allows it, but everyone's interested.
Allows the removal?
Allows the removal, but I think everybody's wondering what is going on in the Circuit Attorney's office and how's it going to be resolved.
Very interesting. As a matter of just practicality, you've written about issues of racial segregation and some of the conflicts that have existed in our history. The Circuit Attorney and her supporters have said this is a racial attack on democracy itself. It's a white unelected Attorney General. How does that factor play into the broader public perception of this? Can you speak to that at all?
Oh yeah, well that makes this very high stakes. So I think that if the Supreme Court of Missouri removes the first African American popularly elected circuit attorney in St. Louis, it's going to be national news. And Gardner's argument has been that this has been a politically motivated witch hunt targeting her. And if there is any evidence of bias in the Attorney General's office or witnesses or anything like that, then a lot of the public might believe Gardner. So I think Judge Torbitsky was sensitive to just how serious this matter could be and how explosive it could be.
Anders Walker, we appreciate your insight and analysis very much. We do hope to check back with you, and we might get the chance to do that periodically because there are rolling hearings every few weeks to kind of go through this disclosure until the tentative trial on September 25th. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
In the U.S. Senate this week, Senator Josh Hawley filed a pair of new bills. An NBC News headline profiling them says this, quote, Josh Hawley wants the government to play a bigger role in lowering drug prices. Hawley's proposals would force pharmaceutical companies to sell drugs to American patients at the same rates as other major countries or face big fines. He would also outlaw prescription drug rebates in federal and private health plans. Senator Hawley is now on the record. Your proposal to outlaw prescription drug rebates, would it effectively put pharmacy benefit managers out of business?
It would certainly mean, Mark, that what they cannot do, these big insurance companies, there's only like 3 of them, they're monopolies now. What they cannot do is go and get special kickbacks from Big Pharma where they make a whole bunch of money, the insurance companies, and then they raise the prices for consumers. So my bill would say no rebates, none of these special kickbacks, none of these special rebates. You can't do that. You've actually got to lower the price for consumers. And then I've introduced legislation that would cap the price of all pharma drugs in this country at the same price that they're offered at in Europe and Canada.
An NBC News article profiled that bill of yours, and it characterized you as somewhat out of step with the Republican Party orthodoxy on capitalism in medicine, I suppose. How would you respond to conservative or libertarian economists who have argued in the past that price controls lead to socialism?
Well, listen, I would just say this. There is no reason that Big Pharma ought to be lining its own pockets on the backs of Missouri patients, Missouri seniors, and Americans across the country. Why should people in our state have to pay 2 and 3 and 4 times more for the same drug that pharma's selling in Canada or France or Germany or wherever? They shouldn't be able to.
Is it a price control?
What it is an index. I mean, it is an index to what pharma is charging in other countries, our peer countries, have peer economies. I just don't think pharma can really offer a good reason as to why the same drug, here Mark, we're talking about the same drugs now, why in Canada and France and Germany they cost like half or a third of what they do in the United States. The reason is they're just fleecing Americans. They're making Americans pay for cheap drugs in other countries. And I think we ought to say no to that. Let's protect our people and get those drug prices down.
A lot of Americans are watching a different pharmaceutical issue this week where the Supreme Court might block access to mifepristone, the abortion pill. President Biden passed a rule saying that American soldiers and veterans could still access that medication that the FDA approved through the Department of Veterans Affairs. You voted to block that Biden rule. Why?
I don't think that we ought to be using taxpayer dollars and the United States military to fund abortions of any kind. This has long been, Mark, an area of consensus. Wherever people are on abortion, of course, in Missouri is a majority pro-life state. But even if you're very in favor of abortion, surely we can agree that taxpayer money and taxpayer-funded facilities should not be used to administer abortions. I mean, this has been a long tradition that President Biden, when he was in the Senate forever, voted for many times. And now he's changed his tune. They want to spend taxpayer money on abortions all across this country. I'm opposed to that.
The FDA, of course, sets national policy on drugs across all state lines, and the abortion pill impacts pregnancies in the first 10 weeks. We know that judge in Texas who made this ruling was someone who donated to your campaign. You confirmed him to the bench. Are you comfortable with the policy he set becoming the national policy?
Well, the lawsuit, as I understand it, is about whether the Biden administration's new rule, which says that you don't have to go see a doctor to get this chemical abortion drug. Doctors don't have to be present when the patient is taking the drug, whether or not that's safe. And what the district court found, as I understand it, is that is not safe. And what the Fifth Circuit Court found, to walk through the appeals process, is the Fifth Circuit found, no, actually, you do need to get a prescription. And doctors do need to be present. That's been the rule, Mark, until very recently, and that seems very reasonable to me.
Would you be comfortable with a ban on that medication nationwide?
Oh, I would not legislate that. I mean, this is not, and this, to be clear, this is not something we're voting on. This is a lawsuit that is working its way through the courts. But I think where the courts have currently landed, as it stands right now, which is that this drug, this chemical abortion drug, has to actually be prescribed by a doctor, and there have to be doctors available to help any patient who is, for instance, has major medical complications because of the drug. I think it's totally reasonable. That was the law until very recently.
And that has been the standard. You also sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, as many in our audience know. Should the Senate investigate those personal gifts from a mega donor to Justice Clarence Thomas?
You know, I don't understand why the Democrats and the left continually target Justice Thomas. There are a lot of conservative justices on the court, you know, at least 5. Why do they constantly target year after year Clarence Thomas? I just think it's a little bit suspicious. I think it's a little strange. I mean, listen, I know Justice Thomas to be a man of integrity. I don't think there's any serious allegation that he has intentionally done anything wrong here. And I think that today it's this, tomorrow I promise you it will be something new, because it always is. They're always targeting him. And I just think that there's got to be some other motivation here. I just don't understand why he's the one guy, the one justice of the conservatives who's always targeted.
He doesn't deny that he accepted the gifts, and he doesn't deny that he sought legal counsel on whether he should disclose them or not. He thought he didn't have to. Do you see an ethical concern there? And would you like to hear from Chief Justice Roberts on how all members of the court should comport themselves as it relates to ethics?
Well, I think you're right about Justice Thomas, and that he attempted to follow the law and followed the advice he was given, which is all we can ask anybody to do. And I think now he said if he needs to amend his reports, he will. I mean, I think that that's perfectly fine and upstanding. I think any effort to categorize him, to castigate him as somehow unethical, and this constant campaign of demonization against this justice, I think is just wrong. And again, I think it's probably based on other motivations.
All right, thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you.
Senator Tammy Duckworth joins us now from her offices in Washington, D.C. She's on the record with us. Senator, I want to start where we left off with Senator Hawley. Are you satisfied with the answers that Justice Clarence Thomas gave about he sought legal advice, he didn't think he had to disclose these gifts, now he's going to amend his disclosures? Is that enough for you, or do you want to see more investigation?
No, it's not enough. Here's what I think. I think that the members of the Supreme Court need to have a code of ethics, just like everybody else, just like every other judge in our judiciary. And certainly they need to live by them. I've not been satisfied with any of his answers that he's given, because frankly, I don't think they're very straightforward. For him to call, you know, these old friendships, the old dear friends I've known for 25 years, yet he's been on the bench of the Supreme Court for 31 years, just speaks to the fact that he's not being upfront with all of us.
Have you seen enough information so far that would warrant taking action, or is it just at the point where you need more information?
Well, I don't know what action there is to be taken, because the Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics by which that governs them. So, for example, here in the Senate, you know, we have rules that we have to abide by. Those rules don't really exist for members of the Supreme Court, and so I don't know what action could be taken. But frankly, I think that this shows just how deeply in the pockets of the ultra wealthy some members of our Supreme Court are, and you know, we need to be very clear as to who our Supreme Court justices are associating with, and certainly, especially when they're taking enormous gifts, the way Justice Thomas has taken from his friend.
Does it confuse or undermine the trust in whatever decision the court might come out with as it relates to mifepristone, the abortion pill? We expect that decision or extension to be announced tomorrow.
Of course it does. You know, the Supreme Court of the United States has been significantly injured in terms of its reputation among the American people, because it has become so partisan. And even the process of seating Supreme Court justices have been incredibly partisan. We have Supreme Court justices right now who essentially lied to Congress when they came before the Senate, who said that how they would vote in the future and how they would, not interfere with Roe v. Wade. And yet the first thing they do when they get there is vote to knock down Roe v. Wade. So the Supreme Court certainly does have a credibility issue with the American people, and this latest case is not helpful to that.
It seems like this mifepristone case, both in terms of the FDA's legal authority and the states, the court has already said the states have the ability to set this abortion question. So you have the FDA powers, you have the state issues, and then there's the military and the VA benefits. All of this seems to open this huge can of worms. We saw the Biden administration say they want to still go ahead and make those abortion pills available through the VA to active duty or veterans, I presume. There was a big vote in the Senate earlier where most Republicans voted to try and block that rule. Can you help us understand what's actually the impact to active duty or to veterans and access to this abortion pill? What could change depending on this? Could this Supreme Court case impact that rule?
Well, this Supreme Court case can impact all sorts of things, even beyond abortion. But let me be clear about what their situation is with the VA and members of the military. Okay, there's two different things happening. The VA provides access to abortion care for veterans who qualify for VA care who have been victims of rape, incest, or the life of the mother is on the line. That is when VA provides reproductive abortion care. And so we have Republicans who want to take away that access and it's there only for victims of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. And they want to take that away. For military women, where it is right now is military women, the new rule in the DOD is that a military woman can go to her commander and say, I cannot, because I'm stationed in a state that has restricted my access to reproductive health care. I need to travel to another state to access health care. And the DOD will give that female service member time off that cannot be leave without pay, that cannot be make her use of vacation time, so she can travel to another state like Illinois to access the health care that she needs. She doesn't have to tell her commander what that health care is. It may be to go get an IUD implanted. It may be to go get access to in vitro fertilization in states that are starting to narrow down access to IVF. Or it could be to access abortion services. So let's be clear about what the DOD and what VA provides. Now, with this particular case, this is a single judge saying that he has the right to overturn a drug that has been deemed safe for use for 20 years by the FDA. What this sets up is if the Supreme Court upholds this ruling, then it basically opens all the drugs that FDA has approved to somebody, anyone, your next door neighbor who maybe doesn't believe in insulin or perhaps doesn't believe in contraception could go cherry pick a judge and put in a case and say, hey, you know what? We're going to make it so that we're going to overturn the FDA's decision that IUDs are safe for use, or we're going to overturn the decision that women should be able to take a pill that allows their bodies to produce more eggs, like I did when I was struggling with infertility, to try to increase my fertility so I could have children. This opens the doors in an enormous way for individuals to overturn the ruling of the FDA and overturn also the decisions in states like mine that have decided that we are going to be a state that will provide abortion care and reproductive health care to women.
Yeah, it seems like it's teetering on the edge of a national policy, which would sort of contradict the Supreme Court's initial decision about leaving it to the states. There's a whole lot to get into there. I know we're short on time, so I'll just ask you this to respond to Senator Hawley. He said he voted against the mifepristone rule from the Biden administration as it relates to the VA because of the Hyde Amendment. He says that taxpayers should have the ability to object to abortion medications being used with taxpayer funds. How would you respond to that?
The Hyde Amendment never applied to the VA from the very beginning.
So
it
that
never included
argument,
the VA. That argument is a false argument.
and you listed earlier a number of only limited circumstances where it would be applied anyways.
Exactly. Life of the mother, rape or incest victims. And he wants to take it away. He wants a victim of rape. And by the way, women in the military faces heightened dangers from military sexual trauma. He wants women in the military who are victims of rape, incest, or who may be facing dying if they don't have access to abortion care. He wants them to not have access to the health care that they need.
All right, Senator Duckworth, we will stay tuned to watch what the Supreme Court does with this. We expect to hear more tomorrow. Thanks for your time. A new 14-member Board of Aldermen swore the oath of office this Monday, kicking off a new legislative session at City Hall. The president of the board, Megan Green, is now on the record after delivering this in her inaugural address.
I believe St. Louis can right its national reputation. We can be known and should be known for pioneering new approaches that reduce crime, alleviate disparities, and address poverty. We have to address the cascading issues that lead to homelessness in the first place. We know housing instability and evictions put people on a path toward poverty. To those whose only option is to rent, and to those who choose to rent, mark my words, this will be the year of the tenant.
You said that this would be the year of the tenant.
Correct.
What does that mean?
Well, what we've had for so long in St. Louis, really as a result of a lot of our state laws, is an imbalance between the rights that landlords have versus the rights that tenants have. We know that about 56% of people in the city of St. Louis are renters right now, and too many are living in conditions where they are paying their rent, they're upholding their part of the deal, but the place that they are living has, rodents or water that doesn't work or electricity doesn't work. So what we're looking to do is hold landlords more accountable for the condition of their property and make sure that tenants are also protected and have access to legal counsel if end up going through eviction proceedings.
Do they have that access now?
They do not have free access, and so this would guarantee access to legal counsel, where the city would pay for legal counsel for people under a certain earnings per year.
And are those lawyers on staff at the city now, or those are contracted lawyers outside?
They would more than likely be contracted out. The city doesn't have the internal legal capacity right now to handle that.
There are many reasons why a person might choose to rent instead of buy if they're moving to the area, but I was surprised to learn, looking at some of the data, just how much square footage you could buy paying less in a mortgage if you can sock away enough money to get into it. Is there any better protection against a landlord than becoming your own?
I mean, I think that the ultimate goal is a path to home ownership for everyone, but we know that that requires having safe, affordable housing for folks to be able to, build the reserves that they need in order to put down that down payment. And with interest rates going up the way that they have recently, that has meant that banks have kind of contracted a little bit in terms of the flexibility that they're giving folks. So it's taking people longer to save that down payment. And we also know that there's kind of a squeeze on the rental market right now, that apartments are going off the market really quickly. We don't have enough supply in the city. We don't have enough supply of single family homes either. And so these are all things we need to be working on.
It's interesting, sometimes at risk of oversimplifying, people say one answer to homelessness is building more homes, simple supply and demand there. But you said we don't have enough inventory. We have a ton of homes in LRA, or in many of them are vacant, maybe in a little need of TLC.
Yes.
How much of a solution exists there in untapped potential and just empty properties?
I think that there's a lot of potential there, and we're seeing movement in that direction. Proposition NS that was passed several years ago at the ballot box has been able to provide funds to stabilize a lot of those LRA properties so that we can then get them off the city rolls and into the hands of people who can live in them.
You reiterated this claim time in your speech on Tuesday this week, you said that you see generational change potential in the Rams settlement money, that $250 million.
Yes.
Where can that money best be spent to yield that generational change?
I mean, I think that there are two things that come to top of mind. One, creating an endowment for the city so that helps us to fund things on an ongoing basis.
Put it in the bank.
Yeah, put it in the bank. Use the interest to pay for some ongoing expenses for the city. But I think the second thing and the more transformative thing that we can do is investment in early care and education. We know that too many people are sitting on the sidelines in terms of participating in our economy right now because it's more expensive for them to pay for childcare than it is in the paycheck that they would bring home. And we know that kindergarten readiness often starts with good early childhood access, which then can mean better access or better academics in high school and better college attention and sets kids up for a successful life.
You mentioned 56% of the city rents. I don't know what percentage of the city has children ages 2, 3, or 4. Maybe a decent share, but it's not everybody. How do you talk to the rest of the city and say, this is worth it for you too? What's the sell?
Well, I think the sell is that any city that is going to grow has to be a place where families want to live and stay. And the fact of the matter is the city of St. Louis has lost almost 40% of our school-age population over the last 20 years. We have to reverse that trend if we're going to reverse population decline in our city. This is an investment not just in the future youth, but also in regrowing the population of our city.
In your remarks, you referred to Republicans in Jefferson City as leaning in the fascist direction, referring to book bans and restrictions on transgender care. But you also mentioned the local control of the police department. Yeah. I understand the political and regional divides on a lot of the social issues, but on control of the police, local control is a two-part phrase, right? We understand the local part of it, but do you think that the city has crime under control?
I think we are moving in the right directions. The fact of the matter is we've had public safety systems that have relied on this arrest and incarcerate model that have been in place for almost my entire lifetime. And so changing the way that we approach public safety to a place that's more restorative and that focuses more on prevention isn't going to happen overnight. But we did make a historic $20 million investment in the Office of Violence Prevention last year. A lot of those programs are getting built out. And I think that within the coming months and years, we're going to start to see much different public safety outcomes as a result of that.
A progressive candidate, Brandon Johnson, just won election to be Chicago's mayor using a similar message. In your remarks, you said on Tuesday in your speech, you said something to the fact, I'll let you clarify if I get it wrong, but something to the fact that we have to look at the underlying issues or the root issues that drive people into despair to commit acts of violence. What do you say to people in our audience who might hear that and think you're saying it's not their fault?
I think that we have to be conscious of the conditions that we create as a society that give people no other option, or the perception that there's no other option for them. If kids from a young age are not exposed to people who have grown up and gone to college and are participating in the workforce, then that's all they've seen, right? And so, it starts with investment in our youth. It requires investments in things like mental health care and affordable housing and in substance abuse, help. All of those things that have historically been underinvested in, both from the city level and the state level. Mm-hmm. And I think if we start to right some of that, we're going to see different outcomes.
On the Rams settlement money, how soon before that money starts? If you're putting it in the bank, as I think the Urban League has asked for.
Yes.
So it sounds like you might not have plans to spend it right out of the gate, or I know that you have to spend the $30 million on the convention center.
Correct.
Before June.
So the $30 million on the convention center is committed. Outside of that, what we are committed to is a robust public engagement process. Mm-hmm. So this summer, that will start with both paper and electronic surveys going off. And then once we get into the fall, when summer vacations are over and things like that, we will be doing what is called a committee of the whole for the Board of Aldermen. So we will be calling the entire board together as a committee to have public engagement throughout the city that makes sure that we're hearing from people in every corner about the best use for these funds.
All right, a lot on the agenda this legislative session this year. Yes. We look forward to covering more of it. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you.
Hawley and Senators Duckworth and law professor Andrews Walker for giving us up-to-the-minute news analysis and insights from newsmakers in Illinois and Missouri. And a special thanks this week to our producers Jacob Kurth, Nicole Sanders, and Ashley Brandmeier for helping this show happen. It wouldn't happen without them. Tuesday, Mayor Jones gives her State of the City. We'll react to that speech and a lot more at the same time next Thursday. Until then, we're off the record.